The adversary did everything to prevent you from watching this video because what you are about to see could destroy his dominion. Valeria Guzman was dead for 28 minutes and 15 seconds. During this time, she discovered what Satan has tried to hide from us for ages. Jesus revealed to her the greatest lie of the enemy and why he does everything to stop you from praying. What she saw changed her life forever. She realized that prayer is not just words. It's a weapon that makes hell tremble. If you've ever felt something trying to distract you when you wanted to pray, what you're about to see will open your eyes. This will change your life forever. If you manage to watch this video to the end, I died. And what I saw revealed the greatest lie the enemy has made humanity believe. My name is Valeria Guzman. I am 38 years old, and I am a psychologist at a rehabilitation clinic in Bogota. I have heard hundreds of accounts from people who have been on the brink of death, but I never imagined I would experience something like this. What I saw on the other side changed my life forever. It not only showed me the brutal reality of the spiritual world, but also revealed to me the most powerful weapon the enemy desperately fears, and that most people underestimate every day. This story begins on May 14th, 2025. I remember the exact moment when my heart stopped beating. It was 28 minutes and 15 seconds. That's how long I was clinically dead. But what happened during that time showed me a secret he doesn't want you to discover. It all started like any other Tuesday. The traffic in the city was unbearable, and I arrived late at my office. My schedule was full, with sessions of patients struggling with anxiety, addictions, and depression. Problems I learned to address with awareness, but deep down, I knew they had deeper roots. At 2:37 in the afternoon, just as I was finishing a session, an intense dizziness suddenly hit me. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't respond. A sharp pain exploded in my chest. The last image I have is of my assistant screaming my name as I fell to the floor. What followed was silence, an absolute silence that was terrifying. Suddenly I realized I was no longer in the clinic, no longer anywhere in this world. I didn't see the famous tunnel of light. I didn't hear angelic voices. Instead, I found myself in an immense space, without a horizon, without walls, a place I can't describe with human words. I felt an overwhelming peace, but at the same time an expectation, as if something or someone was about to speak to me. And then I heard a voice that didn't come from outside, but resonated within my being, giving me a truth so intense it seemed to pierce every part of me. Valeria was just one word, my name. But in that instant, I understood more about God than in all my life of church, studies, and readings. His voice had the authority of the universe, but at the same time, the tenderness of a father who had always waited for me. I didn't see it as in paintings or movies. There was no human form that could describe what I saw. It was light, but not a light as we know it. I will show you what has always happened around you, but that your human eyes could never see. And in that instant, everything changed, as if I had been given access to a hidden dimension, one that had been there all along, but I had never noticed. I saw my life, but not as I remembered. I saw moments when I had prayed and for the first time understood what really happened when I did. Every time I uttered a prayer in the spiritual world, something moved. I saw dense shadows trying to surround me, creating walls around different areas of my life. My work, my family, my mental peace. These structures were not metaphors. They were real. They were fortresses that the enemy had built with years of doubts, lies, fear, and distractions. But when I prayed, everything changed. Jesus let me see what I had never imagined. My words, even those I had spoken without much faith, produced waves of light that expanded like an explosion. The shadows trembled every time I mentioned his name. Cracks appeared in these demonic fortresses, and when they persevered, they crumbled like sandcastles before a wave. But the most shocking thing was not seeing what happened when I prayed. The most terrifying was seeing what happened when I didn't. Jesus showed me moments when I felt the urge to pray, but ignored it. I saw how, in those moments, the shadows grew stronger. I saw how the enemy celebrated every time I decided to pray later, and ended up getting distracted by the phone, work, or fatigue. Then, Jesus told me something I will never forget. Now you understand why they fight so hard to distract you. At that moment, everything made sense. The enemy does not fear my sermons, does not fear my Christian music, does not fear the verses pasted on the walls. He fears my prayer because every prayer made in faith is a devastating blow against his kingdom. There are demons specialized in making people feel too tired to pray. Others, experts in filling the mind with worries just when someone is preparing to talk to God. Others are in charge of whispering lies. God doesn't hear you. You're not praying enough. You're not saying the right words. And I saw how many people fell into this trap, as I myself had done so many times. But then Jesus showed me something that filled me with hope. I saw prayers from years ago, words I had completely forgotten, still active in the spiritual world. I saw that the prayers of my grandmother, a woman who spent her life praying for her family, continued to destroy the enemy's plans over our lineage. Because what no one tells you is this: a prayer never dies. The words we speak in faith continue to have an effect long after they have been said. They travel through time, dismantling the enemy's plans and activating angels in ways we never imagined. Jesus looked at me and said, "The enemy does not fear the Christian who goes to church, does not fear the Christian who reads the Bible occasionally, but he trembles before the Christian who understands the power of prayer and uses it." At that moment I knew. I had to go back. I had to tell this to everyone who would listen. Suddenly I felt I was being pulled back, violently. The light disappeared, and the void turned into chaos. I opened my eyes. I was in the emergency room. The machines were beeping frantically. My chest hurt. The doctor was shouting my name. I had returned, but I was no longer the same. Since that day, I have never seen prayer the same way again. Because now I know the truth. And so do you. The doctors couldn't understand how it was possible. My heart had been stopped for 28 minutes and 15 seconds. For them, there was no explanation. For me, the answer was clear. I came back with a purpose. For days, my body was weak, but my mind was more alert than ever. I no longer saw the world the same way. Every conversation, every moment of silence, every thought. I knew that behind the visible, there was something more, an invisible war that most people ignore, but that happens every day, every second. And the worst part is that most people are losing this battle without even realizing it. What Jesus showed me not only left me stunned but devastated me, made me understand why my life has been a roller coaster of emotions, why certain problems seemed unsolvable, and why so often I felt my prayers weren't working. I saw with my own eyes. The enemy does everything to prevent us from praying. He doesn't attack us in an obvious way. He doesn't appear with horns and tridents. His strategy is more subtle and much more dangerous. He uses distractions, worries, exhaustion, doubts, uses our own routine against us. He convinces us that praying later is acceptable, until that later never comes. Jesus allowed me to see the world from a perspective I never imagined. I saw demons gathered in what seemed to be strategy rooms. They were shadowy figures, filled with anger and frustration, discussing how to divert people's attention so they wouldn't focus on God. If we can get them to be distracted by their phone before bed, instead of praying, we strengthen our fortresses, they added. If we make them believe that God doesn't hear because they don't feel anything when they pray, they will lose faith in their own authority. At that moment, I understood everything. The greatest struggle was not against sin, but against prayer, because the enemy knows something that many Christians do not understand. Every prayer destroys his work. Then Jesus showed me something that took my breath away. The prayers I didn't make. I saw moments when I felt the urge to pray for someone, but didn't. I saw occasions when I postponed talking to God because I was busy with the spiritual world. Those prayers would have been the key to changing entire situations, but they were never uttered. By not being uttered, the enemy kept his ground intact. However, what I saw next gave me hope. Jesus showed me that no prayer is lost. I saw requests I made years ago and thought God had never answered, but in the spiritual world, they remained active, dismantling enemy structures I didn't even know existed. I saw that prayer is not just a momentary act, but an eternal investment, something we launch into time and continues to have an effect, even after we forget we made it. Then, Jesus spoke to me with an authority that made my soul tremble. How? What? The enemy does not fear the Christian who goes to church but does not pray, does not fear the Christian who reads the Bible occasionally. He fears the Christian who understands the power of prayer and uses it. These words burned inside me because for years I believed that prayer was just an act of devotion, something I should do. But now, I saw the truth. Praying is not a ritual. It is not a ritual. It is a war. It is a frontal attack against the forces that operate in the shadows. The enemy does not fear our good intentions. He fears our prayers. At that moment, everything made sense. I saw how my simplest prayer had wreaked havoc in the spiritual world. Every Lord, protect me, had thwarted plans of accidents. Every God, I surrender this to you, had frustrated the enemy's traps. Every in the name of Jesus had released an explosion of power that forced demons to retreat. But the enemy made me believe that if I didn't pray with beautiful words or for entire hours, then it wasn't worth it. A lie. Jesus showed me something even deeper. I saw angels ready to act, waiting for the prayers of believers. I saw demons terrified when a person dared to pray with faith, not because of the believer themselves, but because of the power of the name of Jesus that came out of their mouth. I saw how a simple prayer could change the destiny of a person, a family, an entire city. But then Jesus showed me the opposite. I saw places where prayer was scarce or non-existent, and saw how the enemy reigned without resistance. I saw entire families destroyed because no one prayed for them. I saw generations trapped in the same cycles of pain because there was never someone who stood up in prayer to break those chains. I saw schools, cities, countries, places where the enemy operated freely because there was no prayer coverage. Then Jesus looked at me and said something that was engraved in the deepest part of my soul. What the enemy fears most is the prayer you have not yet made. It was at that moment that I knew I needed to return. The next image I saw was outside the hospital. I felt an intense and brutal pain. The absolute peace disappeared. Suddenly I felt my body again. The noise of the machines, the desperate voices of the doctors. My eyes opened and I knew I had returned. The brain should have suffered irreparable damage due to lack of oxygen, but all the tests came back normal. "It's a miracle," whispered a nurse. But I knew it wasn't just a miracle. It was a mission. The following hours were a whirlwind of questions, medical exams, and looks of astonishment. But inside me, what mattered most was what I had just learned. I had seen the spiritual war with my own eyes, understood what the enemy fears most, and knew I had to warn others before it was too late. The first days after my return were strange. Everything seemed the same, but I was no longer the same. I could be in a normal conversation and suddenly feel deeply that something invisible was moving in the environment. People talked about problems, anxieties, crises, but I knew the root of it all was not in the visible. It was a hidden war. I began to clearly perceive the moments when the enemy tried to distract me. Every time I felt an urge to pray, my phone rang. Every time I wanted to talk to God, thoughts about my pending tasks invaded my mind. Every time I decided to pray with determination, fatigue hit me like an avalanche. But this time I knew it was a direct attack, and that changed everything. Jesus had shown me that the enemy holds strategic meetings to keep people away from prayer. I saw with my own eyes how every Christian has spirits assigned to distract and discourage them. I saw demons specialized in making you feel that your prayer is not good enough. I saw how they whispered in people's minds phrases like, "You don't know how to pray well. God is not listening to you. You should pray longer. Otherwise, it's not worth it." I saw how these lies caused millions of people to abandon their prayer life and not even realize they were falling into a trap. And worst of all, I saw how they rejoiced every time someone said, "I'll pray later," and never did. In the spiritual world, there was a victory for the enemy every time someone doubted and said, "This doesn't make sense." The kingdom of darkness gained more territory, but what terrified them the most was when someone discovered the truth, because when a believer understands the power of prayer and uses it, they are unstoppable. That was the reason why the enemy tried to keep me in the dark for so many years. He did everything to convince me that my prayer was insignificant, sold me the lie that if I didn't have a perfect prayer, God wouldn't hear me. But now I saw everything clearly. Every prayer counts. Every word directed to God destroys something in the kingdom of darkness. And now I understood why the enemy fights so fiercely to prevent us from praying. Jesus showed me that prayer is not just talking to God. It is the most powerful weapon that exists and the only one the enemy cannot counterbalance. From that moment on, I decided that I would never again underestimate the power of prayer. As an intercessor, I stopped worrying if I said the right words or if I sounded spiritual enough. I simply prayed, and the change was immediate. I felt a strength I didn't have before. The distractions no longer had the same effect on me. The doubts could no longer manipulate me. The enemy tried, but I already knew his strategy. And the most incredible thing was to see how my prayers began to transform my surroundings. I prayed for my family, and wounds that had been open for years began to heal. I prayed for my friends, and suddenly they started to draw closer to God. I prayed for my patients, and I saw how some of them found peace for the first time in their lives. But the most impactful thing was what I saw in my own life. For the first time, I felt completely free. Jesus told me clearly, the enemy does not fear a Christian who simply believes in God. He fears a Christian who prays with authority. And now I was one of those people. Since that day, I made a pact with God. I would never again ignore the importance of prayer. I would never again allow the enemy to steal my connection with heaven. I would never again let fatigue, distraction, or doubt keep me away from the most powerful thing I have, my relationship with God through prayer. Now the question is, what about you? If you have made it this far, it is not by chance. Maybe the enemy has done everything possible to keep you away from prayer. Maybe he has convinced you that your prayers don't make a difference, that you don't have time, that there are more urgent things. But now you know the truth. Every prayer counts. Every prayer has power. Every prayer destroys the enemy's plans. The decision is yours. Will you continue to ignore the invisible war, or will you take your place in the battle? Because I promise you one thing. The enemy fears the prayer you have not yet made, and you have in your mouth the ability to make his kingdom tremble. Now you know? Now you know. The enemy trembles when you pray. Will you let him continue stealing your prayer, or will you use your weapon? Have you ever felt that something was trying to stop you from praying? Leave a like and share this with someone who needs to know the truth. Subscribe and activate the bell. What comes next is even more impactful. Now click on this video on the screen, because if this story impacted you, what you will see will open your eyes even more. See you there.